Hi, welcome to Jadekind Gaming. My name is Adam. I'm here with another world building video. Is this 4? And this video is on planar structure, which is, at least within Dungeons and Dragons, relevant. If you're playing some other game, it may not have any sort of assumptions of multiple planes. Dungeons and Dragons assumes there are multiple planes. It is baked right into the game, the rules, the spells, a lot of items. It assumes that there are other planes. So if you're building your own world, you have a few options. You can assume that you're just making a material plane. You can take the base assumed planar structure, the Great Wheel in 5th edition is the assumption they make. You can take that as is and just say, I am only replacing the material plane, and that works wonderfully. I've done that many times. In fact, if your game is not designed to feature extraplanar travel and such a whole lot, that's usually what I would recommend. If you're not using the other planes, just do that. Now, especially if you want to use extraplanar travel and you want to have a lot more control, customization, just you have your own ideas for it, you can create a whole new planar structure. Or you can go without any planes. However, that is as much work as doing your own planar structure, because it's basically redefining everything in the game that uses the planes has to be redefined to not use other planes. So you're still basically having to fit all of this other plane stuff, either push it out of the game or fit it into your material plane. So, I think the first step in this is let's go over 5th edition's general assumption, because that is the quickest, easiest, just sort of, basically if you don't want to worry about it, that's what you would do. You can just sort of say, it's whatever the rules show. And within that, there is the material plane, and that's generally what you think, and that's your world. That's, the main world you're building. To what is Earth, you're building that is your material plane. And then there are like positive and negative planes that are life and death, etc. General outer concepts. And then within this cosmology, there are material echoes, the Feywild and Shadowfell, which are added to the Great Wheel in 5th edition. If you look at, say, materials from like 3rd edition when they used the Great Wheel, those weren't there. There was, I believe, the Plane of Shadow, and Feywild was like it was the Plane of Fey, and you could add it, but it wasn't assumed. And I don't believe they were at all material echoes, which is almost the idea of there's a city on the material plane, the Shadowfell has a dark city in the same spot, and there is a fantastic and wild city in the Feywild there. And that is a key concept to remember, material echoes. You can use that for more than just those planes if you make your own planes. You can have elemental planes that are material echoes, or etc. You can have all your planes be an echo of the material plane. It's always a thought when building your own. Within the Great Wheel, there is also transitive planes, astral and ethereal planes, mostly used to get between planes and planar travel. There are the inner planes, which are, in this, the elemental planes. Air, earth, fire, water, and the elemental chaos. And those are like right, close to the material plane, and then further beyond that in the Great Wheel are the outer planes, which are the planes of the deities. They are like alignment-centered planes, and there's, 16 of them, I think? But like Mount Celestial, Elysium, Limbo, the Abyss, Hades, the 9 Hells, etc. There are planes that are designed to be the the homes of the gods, basically, and they are alignment focused. And then, of course, the game also has like demi-planes, and things like that. What could be as simple as, I have a bag of holding. Where is the stuff in this bag? It's a little demi-plane. It's a small plane contained to itself, just used to house the stuff of my bag. It's and then there's the far realm, which is outside of the planes, the place where aberrations come from. But yeah, so you have a whole planar structure that you get the basics of in the back of the player's handbook. Page like 300 to 303. Yeah, you can just use that. That can be your structure. And if you're a game master and maybe you use that, but you want to involve planar travel, you just didn't want to come up with your own planes, this edition in particular has you covered in the core rules. If you take your Dungeon Master's Guide and go to page 43 to 67, it covers the both inner and outer planes, the transitional planes, the material echoes, and it gives details about them. It details Mount Celestia. It details, the Beastlands and Ysgard and the elemental planes. Many of them, it gives unique features, optional rules to help the plane feel different than the material world. Different things in the astral and ethereal planes, the way that portals to other worlds show up, or the way that, harmful effects like storms travel through those planes. It focuses on a whole bunch of options for that. So if you end up using that, those planes, and you do elemental travel, like it's actually your party goes to the other planes, and you didn't want to build your planes yourself, you only wanted to build your own material plane, you still have plenty of details to run adventures in the other planes, just, within the Dungeon Master's Guide. So you're covered. If you didn't expect your world to need other planes, so you just decided to go with it, but the party decided, hey, we got this, new spell. Let's go somewhere else. Well, hold on, let me read that. And a lot of it is, a column, maybe. It's not a huge amount, enough you can just say, give me a few minutes, guys, let me remind myself what was going on there at the time. But that same chapter, starting at 43, also gives you some guidelines if you want to create your own planes. And I did actually want to read a little section of it. Putting the planes together as described in the Player's Handbook. The assumed D&D cosmology includes more than 24 planes, and for your campaign, you decide what planes to include. Inspired by the standard planes, drawn from Earth's myths, or created by your own imagination. But at the minimum, most D&D campaigns require the following elements, and it gives you a little bullet list. And I'm going to read each one, and then I'll expand on it, because they're making some assumptions you don't have to make. A plane of origin for fiends. Yeah. Demons, devils, where do they come from? Or your world building. Maybe your world has no demons and devils. And if it doesn't, then you don't need a place for them to come from. A plane of origin for celestials. The same thing applies. A plane of origin for elementals. Again, you don't have to have them. Or maybe one or all of these actually originate from your material plane. Maybe the elementals are the wild forces of real nature, and they're just natural too. You got your dog, your cat, your wind elemental. They're just the creatures that your material plane may house. It doesn't say that those can't be your material plane. You just have to know where they're coming from if you have them. A place for deities, which might include any or all of the previous three. You can have, your good deities in the same plane that, in the heavens where the celestials are for, and your evil deities in the hells where your fiends are from. Again, you can have your deities living on the material plane on, Mount Olympus, this great mountain above, above a wonderful city. And, oh yes, up that mountain, that's where the gods live. Physically can be climbed and reached. Treacherous, dangerous, but possible. You can just throw them all right onto your material plane if you want. A place where mortal spirits go after death, which might include any or all of the first 3 or 4, I'd say, or 4. If your deities aren't from the same places as fiends, celestials, and elementals, people can go to, even if they don't go to those places, they can go wherever the deities are. And that is an important one. Because, let's say you decide no place for that, they just go away. If that's the case, most of the general raise dead spells don't function. Because if a mortal spirit just goes into non-existence when it dies, then it can't be brought back to the body. It can't be brought back if it's gone. So it must go somewhere if your game world has the ability for people to be brought back from the dead, which is common in D&D. It's a general assumption. The fact that your deities are somewhere, whether an outer plane or up that mountain, the fact that they're somewhere where a mortal can go get to them, regardless of what great lengths are required, is a key part of D&D, that they are reachable. Especially for when you get into the epic level of campaigns and you have these great heroic things. You walk into the court of some great deity and you petition them for whatever is needed. So you have to know, well, where is that? A way of getting from one plane to another. Astral and ethereal planes generally serve that purpose, but if you get rid of them, well, now how do you get around? And a way for spells and monsters that use the astral plane and the ethereal plane to function. So just in general, pointing out, there are spells, astral projection. Well, you can just get rid of all of those spells. There are settings where it just says, no, none of those spells work. None of those spells function. Those aren't spells in this world. And you can do that. But that cuts off a big chunk of magic. And so you have to be making the conscious thought of, within my world, I don't want that kind of magic to work. I don't want you to be able to teleport across the room by quickly stepping through another plane. Even though in the way the game works, it just seems like you're just moving from one to the other. In the way the world works, you are zooming through some other plane in order to cut the distance. And if there aren't those other planes, well then, that doesn't work. Or perhaps you just redefine how magic works, which is still as much work, but it's just things to think about. And there's a nice little list on page 43 of the Dungeon Master's Guide. And then the following page also includes some other just thoughts, a variety of different planes, World Axis, World Tree, and Great Wheel being some of their more popular ones, but other ones. The Omniverse, which is a very simple cosmology that covers the bare minimum: a material plane, the transitive planes, a single elemental chaos, and overheaven, where the good aligned deities and celestials live, and the underworld, where evil deities and fiends live. That is, if you want to really pare down your world, you can just use that. And that's a little, couple sentences, little block, and you can say, this is the cosmology of my world. And particularly if you're not planning on using a cosmology, you're not planning on extraplanar travel, that's a good simplified way to do it. But just make the decision. If you're making a world, particularly for Dungeons and Dragons, make the decision of how do your planes work. And you can, again, go through. And there's others. There's, Mount Olympus, or, Myriad Planes, or Solar Barge, or One World, which is, it sort of gives you a few sentences on, there is just a material plane. It includes places like the Bottomless Abyss, the Shining Mount Celestia, the Strange City of Mechanus. There are actual places on the material plane instead of outer planes. You can do that. And it goes into more detail. But D&D assumes that there are other planes. Things within the game function based on it. So whether you just assume, yeah, we're using the Great Wheel, it's whatever there's huge amounts of information in the book on. Or whether you choose one of these other models, you know, there's sort of a page of them and you just sort of read through and say, I like that one. Or whether you make one completely of your own. And like I said, if you're making one completely of your own, you can decide some ideas that I'm playing with currently. It's, you know, perhaps I have a few, you know, I'm still working on the actual model, but it's like, let's say I want the elemental planes. I don't want to do like Shadowfell and Feywild, but what if I make the elemental planes my material echoes, and I have 4 material echoes, one for each element, and so now I have like a plane of fire that is as if the material plane were constantly ablaze and with, you know, oceans of lava, and a plane of water that as though the world itself were completely submerged underwater. Just sort of the idea of making it where you get such great options for an alternate version of any given location of your city, of your world, that you've built one world, and now you just, each key point you can tweak and alter to make it work with one of these other planes, and explore possible variations, and what would this place be like in another plane. And you can decide, you know, if you want a plane for, you know, each alignment and just have 9, as, you know, they've done the things a little different. You know, you can have a plane for each of the alignments in the game. You can decide that you have, you know, you've made your deities, and you're going to give each one of them a plane, and just arrange all of the other features of the game, you know, all the plane requirements into, well, who controls this? The deity of travel runs the plane that floods between every other plane, and in order to ever travel between one plane and another, you must always go through the deity of travel's, you know, plane. That is how you get between the planes, is strictly through him. He controls the movement between planes because he controls travel. You can, you know, you can base it on your deities, or on the different, you know, the different races. You know, the dwarves come from, you know, this, you know, earthen plane, and elves from the woodlands, and now they've all converged after great history onto the material plane. But each of them sort of, the different races lean back to where the different planes are. All sorts of options for making your own planes. And I will say, in 3rd edition or 3.5, I don't know, the manual of the planes is a great option if you're looking at trying to figure out things with making your own planes. It gives details that even the current editions don't, though it does go over the Great Wheel, minus the material echoes. And it gives you ideas for how you can make your different planes different. What is the gravity like on different planes? I mean, is it normal or heavy or light? But then also, what if there's no gravity, or objective directional gravity, which is the idea that I'm in the plane of air, I can think gravity is pulling me that way, and I can basically fly by choosing which direction I am falling. Or I don't know if that's objective or subjective, but still, they have, you know, different options. The rates of time. If I go to this other plane and I stay there for a week, when I go back to the material plane, has 3 years passed? You know, you don't have to worry about that, but it's an idea to make your plane unique. Or can I stay there for years and not a second has passed on the material? Different alignment or elemental or energy traits. The idea of, if you go to the plane of fire and you're not immune to fire, are you always burning? I mean, your plane of fire doesn't have to be like that. It can just be hot. And perhaps, you know, those that aren't, maybe generally you go through exhaustion, in which case you can't stay there long, but you're not immediately caught on fire. How does magic work on the plane? You know, is it normal? Is it completely non-functional? Has whatever deity controls the plane shut magic off and there's no magic on their plane? Is it wild? Do I cast a spell, but a different spell comes out because I can't control it? Or is it weak or enhanced? Just different options. And they just sort of go through things like that. They give all sorts of details on different planes, you know, who would inhabit them, like, including the planes from the Great Wheel. And then they go, they have this section here on other planes that you can add to the cosmology variant. You know, whether that's the region of dreams, the plane of mirrors, elemental planes of cold and wood, the spirit world, temporal energy plane, like a plane of time, the plane of fairy, which, you know, would be the Feywild, what it's eventually become, the far realm as a plane itself, as opposed to the outside away from the planes. They go through cosmologies in here, like, you know, myriad planes cosmology, where different planes are clumped together, and they have maps of different, you know, planar structures. Some of the you know, winding roads cosmologies, and so some of the things that got a small paragraph in the Dungeon Master's Guide of options for how to align, you know, to structure your planes. A few of those get, you know, a full page or page and a half in this book that'll give you further details. If you really are looking into one of those, you might check out Manual of the Planes. I've liked that for a long time. But yeah, in general, planes can be a lot of fun. If you're building a world and you want to build more than just the normal part of the world, if you want to really get into the supernatural of the world, focusing on the planes can be a lot of fun. But at the same point, it can also be a lot of detail, especially if you decide, you know, if you decide, I'm going to have 25 different planes, that's a lot of work. Now, if you decide, yes, I'm going to pare this down to, I only want there to be 4 planes outside of the material plane, you know, my good, my evil, my elemental, and then the transition. And then there's the material. And that's a minimal amount of work. Heck, you can do all of them as material echoes if you want, or you can have them all finite or all infinite, or whatever you may decide. But that's a simple thing to work on, whereas if you decide you're having a huge number of them and you're detailing what is located on each one, it's great and fun if your adventure is going to take your players to the other planes, and it's rewarding. But if you're not sure where they're going to go, it's a lot of work and you're not sure what's ever going to get used. You can just use the default assumptions and make it easy, but you can play with it as much as you want. If you have questions on ideas, or just want to throw your ideas about different planar design, extra planar design, you feel free to comment below. Any just general world building questions or ideas for what I should cover in future world building videos, feel free to let me know. Thank you for watching. See you next time.